The cloying scent of Vanessa's overpriced cinnamon and vanilla candles clawed at my nose as I sat stiffly on Ryan's leather couch, my hands gripping the armrest. Their massive 12-foot Christmas tree sparkled in the corner like something out of a luxury catalog, but the warmth in the Cherry Creek living room felt suddenly fake manufactured. I could make my famous Christmas turkey this year, I offered, forcing a smile. The one with the sage stuffing your mother swore was better than her grandmother's. Ryan's eyes darted away, his shoulders hunched like he was trying to shield himself from a blow. The gold of his wedding band flashed under the lights. And then, "Dad, you won't be welcome here for Christmas." The words didn't just land, they detonated. My ears rang. My chest went tight. "What did you just say?" My voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the raw, electric shock surging through me. "Vanessa's parents are coming. They'd prefer if you weren't here." Prefer. Like I was some disposable guest. Like I hadn't bled and sweated to make sure he had the life he lived now. I shot to my feet, my knees barking in protest, and strode past the marble coffee table I'd helped them pick out paid for, in part, with my own hands and my own wallet. The Denver air hit me like a slap the moment I stepped outside. I yanked the truck door shut, my breath coming hard, white clouds spilling into the freezing night. My fingers were already dialing before I even knew what I was doing. When the banker's voice came on the line, my tone was ice. "Cancel the $2,800 mortgage transfer. Effective immediately." This wasn't over, not by a long shot. If this story touched your heart, press 1 inch the comments. If you think it could have been handled differently, press 2. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? I drove back to my place on the outskirts of Denver, the skyline shrinking in my rear view like it couldn't get away from me fast enough. Snow hissed against the cracked pavement of my driveway, settling on the chipped railing of my porch. My house wasn't much by Cherry Creek standards, 2 bedrooms, a porch light that flickered in the wind, but it was mine. Paid for, no banks, no debts. No one could tell me I didn't belong here. 62 years old, widower, 8 Christmases since Laura died. And in those 8 years, I'd gone from a man building a future to a man funneling every spare cent into someone else's life. Not just anyone's, my own son's. Ryan was my only child. Once upon a time, he'd light up when I walked into a room. That glow dimmed the moment Vanessa Carter entered his life. Beautiful? Sure. But beautiful, like ice-sharp, cold, and dangerous if you got too close. Her family didn't just breathe money, they weaponized it. Richard and Elaine Carter, private clubs, designer wardrobes, the kind of people who measure a man by the guest list at his Christmas party. 5 years ago, Ryan and Vanessa decided they needed a house worthy of their lifestyle. My lifestyle didn't matter. My savings didn't matter. I made it happen anyway. $47,000 from my home equity loan for the down payment, and then $2,800 a month for the mortgage. Granite countertops because Vanessa couldn't stand laminate. Silk curtains for privacy. Hardwood floors because carpet feels cheap. Every one of those luxuries, bought with my money. And what did I get? A handful of Sunday dinners, birthdays that felt more like business meetings, Christmas mornings that never came. I told myself I was buying a place in their lives, buying my way into moments with future grandkids. I clung to that fantasy like a man clinging to driftwood in a storm. But the Carters had their own storm, and I was always on the outside. It wasn't just the lack of an invitation to their little champagne world, it was the way they looked at me, like I'd wandered in through the service entrance. Angela Price, my oldest friend, had warned me more than once. "Dan, they're using you," she'd say. I'd laugh it off, insisting, "Family is family. You help family." But sitting alone in my kitchen now, the hum of my old fridge, the only sound in the room, that mantra felt like a cruel joke. Across town, in the house my money had built, a 12-foot Christmas tree sparkled in the window. And in a week, it would be surrounded by people who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to their perfect holiday photo. I looked down at my checkbook, still open from paying the utility bill. The balance was higher than it had been in years now that the mortgage transfer was gone. For the first time in years, the air felt lighter in my chest. But it wasn't just relief, it was rage. Controlled, focused. The kind of anger that makes a man start planning. 2 days after Ryan's little announcement, my phone lit up mid-morning with a name I'd rather have blocked: Vanessa. Her name on my screen wasn't just a caller ID, it was a hazard warning. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. Daniel, she began, that syrupy voice she used whenever she wanted something oozing through the line. I need you to pick up my parents from Denver International this afternoon. Flight from Portland lands at 2. I pictured Richard and Elaine Carter cashmere coats, designer luggage, waiting at baggage claim like royalty, expecting me to haul their things like some unpaid driver. Did you forget what your husband told me the other night? I asked, my voice flat. A sharp exhale. Whatever that was about, we need to be practical. You're the only one with free time during the day. The casual arrogance made my jaw tighten. There wasn't a hint of apology, just the assumption I'd roll over, as I always had. And why exactly are you asking me? Because that's what family does, Daniel. They help each other. Besides, her tone turned blade sharp. Let's be honest. You're not my rival. You're too small to be my rival. So just get in your truck and be at the airport by 2. That one hit deliberately, like she wanted to see the bruise form. What airline? I asked quietly. Alaska Air, Flight 447, Carousel 3, and Daniel wears something decent. That blue shirt from Ryan's graduation. They notice things like that. Click. No thank you. At 2:15, instead of playing chauffeur, I was at home in my recliner, Earl Grey steaming in one hand, Denver Post crossword in the other. 7 across. Delayed gratification, 12 letters. Postponement. How fitting. At 2:47, my phone buzzed. Where are you? My parents are. I flipped it face down and turned to the sports section. By 3:30, after a parade of missed calls, I'd finished the paper, cleaned out the junk drawer, and had chili simmering on the stove. The 7th call came from an unknown number, probably Richard or Elaine, begging from a stranger's phone. I let it ring. At 5 o'clock, I'd eaten, washed the dishes, and was deciding between Clint Eastwood or Jimmy Stewart when the front door rattled under heavy pounding. Not knocking pounding. I opened it to Richard's flushed, furious face inches from mine. What the hell is wrong with you? He barked, barging in without so much as a pause. Elaine swept in after him, hair frizzed, mouth pursed. This is unacceptable behavior from someone your age. Absolutely barbaric. Vanessa came last, mascara smudged, voice sharp. You humiliated us. My parents had to take a $40 taxi because you decided to... Get out of my house, I said, each word low and deliberate. They froze, unaccustomed to resistance. Excuse me? Richard blinked. This is my house, I repeated, and I want you out. Now. Elaine's tone dripped condescension. Daniel, you clearly don't understand who you're dealing with. My husband has connections. You can't treat people like us this way without... This is a lesson, I cut her off. About arrogance. About treating people like they're beneath you. Vanessa's laugh was ice. A lesson? You're nobody. You've always been. I'm the man who finally stopped being your bank account and your chauffeur, I said, holding the door wide. The lesson's over. Richard jabbed a finger at me, but didn't dare touch. You'll regret this. Oh. I shut the door behind them with a click that felt like closure. Through the blinds, I watched them stomp to their rental, still arguing as they drove into the December dark. The air in my house felt cleaner, lighter, like I'd finally scrubbed a stain that had been there for years. 3 days later, my face stared back at me from page 3 of the Denver Chronicle. Local man abandons elderly couple at airport during holiday storm. The storm had been 50 degrees and sunny. I set my coffee down so hard the mug rattled against the table. Then I read the article again slowly, word for word like I was examining a crime scene. The photograph staring back at me was an old headshot from my company's website, back when my hair was thicker, my smile was easier, and my patience was dangerously longer than it should have been. The story was a farce. It painted me as some bitter, heartless old man who had abandoned a frail couple at Denver International during a severe winter storm. In reality, Richard and Elaine were in their late 50s, both with better blood pressure than me, and the only storm that day was the one they'd manufactured. The quotes almost made me laugh. Almost. We were forced to take an expensive taxi in dangerous weather conditions, Richard told the Chronicle. At our age, this kind of treatment is not just inconsiderate, it's dangerous. Dangerous? The temperature had been 50 degrees and sunny. The only thing in danger was their pride when the taxi driver didn't recognize them. The byline read, Kelly Grant, lifestyle editor, I didn't know her, but I knew the type: perfect hair, perfect shoes, perfect little circle of friends who all owe each other favors. And Richard Carter? He had a whole Rolodex of people like her. This wasn't journalism. This was placement. Fine. If they wanted to drag me into the public square, I'd make sure the truth was carved into the pavement. I powered up my laptop and started pulling bank statements. 5 years of $2,800 mortgage transfers straight into Ryan's account highlighted. The $47,000 down payment pulled from my home equity loan highlighted. The $18,000 for granite countertops because Vanessa couldn't live with laminate highlighted. Furniture receipts. Property tax checks. Utility bills I'd paid when their credit cards were drowning. Then I turned to Vanessa's social media. There it was, photo after photo. The Carter Christmas table, gleaming with china and crystal, captioned, "Our home never looked better. Check-ins at restaurants where a single bill could cover my month's groceries." Smiling selfies in Cabo, taken the same month I'd paid their water bill. Richard and Elaine's feeds were just as glossy: charity galas, ski weekends in Aspen, golf tournaments at courses I couldn't afford to walk through, much less play. All of it propped up by my money, my labor, my silence. Within an hour, my desktop was covered in neatly labeled folders, one for each year: receipts, transfers, screenshots, all lined up in a timeline that told the real story, not just evidence a weapon. Then I checked Vanessa's Facebook events. There it was: Carter, Brooks Christmas dinner, 12 guests, friends, neighbors, people who read the Chronicle, people whose opinion mattered to the Carters more than anything in the world. I leaned back, my jaw tight. They wanted to put on a show? I'd give them a performance so sharp it would cut through their little world of crystal and cashmere and leave scars they couldn't Instagram away. Christmas night in Denver was knife cold, the kind that made your breath hang in the air like steam off a boiling kettle. Across the street, Ryan and Vanessa's house glowed, like it had been ripped from the pages of a luxury home catalog. The driveway was crammed full, both curbs lined with shiny imports. Through the massive windows, I could see their 12-foot tree glittering under a dozen perfectly wrapped boxes set dressing for the Carters' idea of tradition. I sat in my truck for a minute, watching silhouettes move around the dining table. Every so often, the door opened for another late-arriving guest, letting out a burst of laughter and warmth. Perfect. Showtime. I stepped out, adjusting the navy suit I'd worn to Laura's funeral pressed sharp, a uniform for moments when something had to end. My old leather briefcase hung heavy in my hand, the hinges straining against the packets of truth stuffed inside. The front door was unlocked, of course. Vanessa liked to preen about how safe Cherry Creek was, how they didn't need to live like people in rougher neighborhoods. I pushed it open and stepped inside. Warm air and the scent of rosemary and roast beef hit me first. Then, as every head turned toward me, the air-shifted laughter snuffed out, forks frozen midair. Vanessa stopped mid-pour, a bottle of Merlot suspended over her glass. Ryan's eyes widened like he'd just seen a ghost. Richard and Elaine looked like they wished they had. "Good evening," I said, my voice calm, steady. "I thought I'd drop by. After all, it's Christmas." "Daniel," Vanessa said, her smile stretched so thin it might tear. "This is completely inappropriate. You need to—" "Actually," I interrupted, setting the briefcase on the marble sideboard, "I think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this dinner. This house. This entire lifestyle you've been showing off for years." A low ripple of whispers moved around the table. I unlatched the briefcase and pulled out the first stack of packets. One by one, I walked the table, setting them down in front of each guest. Bank statements, receipts, screenshots, photos, and on top, a copy of the Denver Chronicle article, every lie underlined, every fabrication labeled in thick red ink. Lie. "What is this?" asked a man in a charcoal suit, flipping through pages. 5 years of financial support, I said evenly. $168,000 in mortgage payments, $47,000 down payment. Renovations, utilities, furniture, even that KitchenAid mixer you all fawned over during dessert. Vanessa gave a brittle laugh. "Daniel, you volunteered." I raised a hand. "Let's also talk about what you told the media. The winter storm that never happened. The so-called elderly couple you claim I abandoned at the airport. It was 50 degrees and sunny that day." Richard's jaw tightened. Elaine dropped her eyes to her plate. I pulled out a second stack screenshots from Vanessa's Facebook and Instagram. There she was on a beach in Cabo, cocktail in hand. There were the $1,200 Christmas centerpieces, captioned, "Our home never looked better." All of it, I said, paid for by the man you decided wasn't good enough company for your parents. The silence was heavy now, the kind that doesn't just kill a dinner, it rots a reputation. Faces around the table shifted. Doubt, discomfort, calculation. I closed the briefcase. I won't take more of your evening, but the next time you hear my name in the paper, remember this version, the one with receipts. No one moved. No one breathed. The performance they'd been rehearsing all week had ended the second I walked in, and the standing ovation belonged to me. The man in the charcoal suit didn't look away from Vanessa. Is this true? His voice was quiet, but it had the edge of a man who already knew the answer. It's complicated, she said quickly, forcing a brittle smile. Daniel offered to help us. We never asked. Offered? I cut in, the word tasting foul. That's an interesting way to rewrite history. I have the text from Ryan begging for money the night the mortgage was due, the emails about the countertops, the calls when your cards were maxed and your lights were about to be shut off. Want me to forward those to everyone here? A woman in pearls, Elaine's closest charity friend, shifted in her seat, eyes narrowing. You told me you two bought this house yourselves. Vanessa's smile twitched. Well, technically. Richard leaned forward, his tone dripping boardroom authority. This is a family matter. It doesn't concern. No, I cut him off, my gaze pinning him in place. It became a public matter the second you used your connections to plant that smear in the Denver Chronicle. The man in the charcoal suit turned sharply toward Richard. You planted that article? Richard's silence was all the confirmation anyone needed. I reached into my briefcase and laid the annotated clipping on the table. 50 degrees, sunny, not a snowflake in sight. And these so-called elderly victims? They were headed to a dinner I was banned from attending because my presence would embarrass the Carters. The Pearls woman frowned. Embarrass you? Why? I let the pause stretch until the quiet became uncomfortable. Because I'm not their kind of people. Wrong background, wrong education, wrong size bank account. Vanessa's voice snapped like a whip. Oh, for God's sake, this isn't about class or money. It's about both, I said, my voice low and final. And you built that lie into your brand. Every person here was meant to swallow it without question. Around the table, forks had gone still. Wine glasses sat untouched. The warmth from the roast beef and candles couldn't thaw the cold settling over the room. Daniel, Ryan started, his tone hesitant. Maybe this isn't. It's exactly the right time, I said, because these people deserve to know exactly who they're sharing this table with. The Pearls woman stood abruptly, clutch in hand. I think I've heard enough. Two others followed, muttering their goodbyes, their coats already halfway on. Vanessa reached for her wine, but her hand shook. Richard's jaw was locked in a silent snarl. Elaine kept her eyes on her plate like it might swallow her whole. And me? I stood there, breathing in the quiet collapse of their carefully staged illusion, watching it fray thread by thread right in the heart of the empire my money built. Richard finally broke the silence, his voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. You think barging in here with a stack of papers is going to change anything? You've just made yourself an enemy you can't afford. I leaned one hand on the back of an empty chair, steady and unblinking. The difference between us, Richard, is that I've been your enemy for a long time. You just didn't notice until tonight. Elaine straightened in her seat, chin lifting as she summoned what was left of her composure. You have no idea who you're speaking to. My husband's influence in this city. I know exactly who I'm speaking to, I said, slicing through her sentence. A man and woman who've been dining out on my generosity while calling me a burden behind my back. I let my gaze sweep the table. And I'm speaking to all of you so you understand just how much of this success was bought with someone else's retirement. Vanessa's face was flushed now, the polished hostess mask gone. You're pathetic, Daniel. Bitter and lonely. I'm free. I cut in, my voice like a gavel. And after tonight, I'm done financing the Carter show. This, I gestured at the chandelier, the custom dining set, the 12-foot tree, is the last Christmas I'll ever pay for. Ryan's eyes darted between us, his jaw tight. Dad, maybe we can step outside and... No, I said, my tone final. You had your chance to speak up for me when they shut me out. You stayed silent. Richard pushed back his chair with deliberate force, standing as if height alone could tilt the balance of power. You're leaving this house right now. I smiled without warmth. Gladly, but not before everyone here understands the truth. For 5 years, I paid $2,800 a month to keep this house standing. I paid for your upgrades, your dinners, your vacations, and in return you told this city I was unstable, that I abandoned helpless victims in a storm that never happened. The man in the charcoal suit cleared his throat. I can confirm there was no storm that day. I played golf. A ripple of quiet laughter spread among the guests who remained laughter that wasn't with Richard but at him. Elaine's lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Vanessa muttered something under her breath, but I caught it. We should have just cut him off sooner. I straightened my tie and met her eyes. No, you should have remembered who was keeping the lights on. Ryan slumped back in his chair, as if the weight of the truth had finally crashed down on him. Dad, I'm sorry. Don't say it because you're embarrassed, I said. Say it when you mean it. And maybe say it when these people aren't here to hear it. Richard stepped forward until his face was inches from mine. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said. But tonight, the only ones leaving with less than they came in with are you. I picked up my briefcase and turned for the door. Behind me, the murmurs swelled into full-blown arguments, guests pressing for answers, voices rising, the clink of silverware abandoned mid-meal. The cold air hit me on the porch like a blessing. I glanced back once, through the window at the fractured dining room, now loud and splintering apart. It wasn't Christmas carols I heard, but to me it was the sweetest music in the world. By March, the reckoning arrived in a certified envelope. Notice of default. 3 missed payments, 14 days to cure, or the lender would move to foreclose on the Cherry Creek Palace I'd been propping up for 5 years. I read it at my kitchen table with sunlight spilling over the laminate and a fresh pot of coffee steaming beside the salt shaker. Weather report, clear skies. The phone calls started almost immediately, Vanessa first, then Richard, then Elaine, each one a different flavor of indignation and desperation. I let them stack up on voicemail like unpaid bills. Ryan held out the longest. 97 days after Christmas, he showed up at my door, shadows under his eyes, wearing a suit that hadn't seen an iron in weeks. Dad, he said, standing in my living room like a stranger at a funeral. I'm sorry. For the dinner. For the article. For all of it. He swallowed hard. I chose their approval over your respect. I poured him coffee and let the silence settle. Silence makes some men squirm, it makes others confess. I can't fix the money, he said finally, but I want to fix us. I forgave you already, I told him. But forgiveness isn't financing. I nodded toward the mantel Laura's smile in an old frame next to a picture of Angela's grandkids waving construction paper turkeys. If we start over, it's as father and son. No checks. Respect first. Everything else second. He nodded slowly, the kind of nod that stings, because it replaces pride with truth. A month later, the Cherry Creek house went on the market. They bought smaller, learned quickly how much square footage costs when no parent is underwriting the illusion. Easter Sunday found me at Angela's table with my sage stuffing in the center. Someone passed me a paper crown from a party cracker, and I wore it without irony. Because family isn't the people who want your money at their table, it's the people who want your chair filled. If this story hits something in you, tell me where you're listening from. And subscribe, because real stories don't just demand to be told. They demand to be heard.